Awake and alert. Post-lunch session. Can understand the condition of the delegates. Even had a cup of coffee for the next session. The objectives, evaluating and understanding the fracture, planning and surgical execution, usually seen in bimodal age distribution, high energy trauma in younger individuals and trivial trauma in old osteoporotic patients. The problems here, what we encounter is small articular segments, comminution which is metadiaphyseal, soft tissue injury, prosthetic issues and combinations. The characteristic deformity is shortening of the fracture with varus and extension of distal articular segment. Shortening is caused by the quadriceps and hamstring muscle. Extension and varus is caused by the unopposed pull of the gastrocnemius and adductors. This is AO classification. A is extra-articular, B is partial intra-articular, and C is complete intra-articular. Again subdivided into the sub-classification. I will not be going into detail of this. We need to understand the anatomy of the distal femur. It has a valgus of 5 to 9 degrees. The weight bearing starts from the head of the femur to the center of the talus. Posterior half of the condyles lie posterior to the femoral shaft. The femur transitions from cylinder to condyles, and further medial condyle extends inferiorly, as you can see here, which is very important. I will be coming about it in the coming slides. It is trapezoidal in shape. Unawareness of the anatomy leads to the anterior displacement, medialization and external rotation of the femoral condyles. Both medial and lateral condyles, they merge ventrally at 15 to 25 degrees of angle, and ventral and dorsal joint lines are not parallel. That is very important, which needs to be taken care. Excuse me. Sharp instrument, just a finger dissection. Beautifully it can separate both the muscles. Now you can see the femur jetting out anteriorly. The intermedius is being incised in the center of the femur, and the periosteum is elevated. This case was done under tourniquet. It was a transphyseal fracture in 15 years old boy. So to appreciate the structures, now you can see the medial condyle and lateral condyle which is lying on the medial side. This is the exposure. This reduction was very difficult as it was a transphyseal fracture with gross deformity of the limb. Now, this is after plating. Now you can see once the knee is flexed to 90 degrees, 70 degrees, you can see both the condyles, lateral and medial, beautifully with posterior aspect of both the condyles. This spike which is being put between the patellar tendon and the medial condyle, once you start retracting with the bone spike, you can even visualize the medial aspect of the medialmost part of the condyle, as you can see here. Now you can add a plate through the same approach. You need not go for separate medial approach or any minimal invasive approaches in this kind of in this case. You can add one more plate on the medial side. Ideally, the plate should be more posterior medial than dead medial. Now, even what I try to do is to confirm the notch screws, I pass a mosquito in the notch area, which is shallow anteriorly and deep posteriorly, and try to palpate.
Delegates. Yeah, this is talk after Rahul's lecture, great lecture, and which he has elucidated all the basics and also some of the complex cases. This is the other side of the spectrum. And if you see these cases with open fractures, with significant amount of bone loss and lot of comminution, and some of the cases with infections and late presentations, then our idea of internal fixation, it becomes a little bit doubtful. And if you see these complications, all with the internal fixations, axis malalignments, infections, so then in this scenario, what should be our treatment of choice in these complicated cases? And what are these fractures actually? These are high energy injuries and most devastating injuries, and really they are difficult to treat. And what exactly is a complex supracondylar fracture? There's no special definition. It is nothing but a difficult clinical scenario. These could be open fractures, infected fractures, and fractures with bone loss of varying degree, and significant comminution with Muller type C, any other fracture it could be, where internal fixation is not feasible, like that of bad soft tissue condition, previous multiple fractures in the same zone, and all other simpler forms of fractures are excluded. And as a general rule, we have to evaluate these major fractures with proper clinical examination and general examination to rule out other injuries to be done, and fitness for surgery and proper counseling is very essential in these complicated and complex supracondylar fractures. Clinical condition has to be explained to the patient, and what is the type of treatment which you are delivering to the patient has to be explained properly, and its advantages, disadvantages, and duration of time has to be explained, and what is going to be the outcome of these fractures. In the first instance, we have to explain to the patient, and what are the objectives of these in these situations. One is the infection-free environment we had to generate, and wound healing is the first battle which we have to win, and osteosynthesis, and we have to cover the bone loss also, and the final thing is, the most important is the stiffness of the knee in these cases. And this can be done in optional 2-stage or 1-stage procedure. It depends on the situation and also on the surgeon's choice. In the stage 1, wound debridement to be done, and sometimes you have to go for external fixator based on the clinical scenario and damage control concept. And second stage, we can go for Elizarov fixation, and wound management is very important, extension of the wound.
What I do, how I do. Like tibia fractures, like intercondylar, supracondylar fractures are difficult to treat, but nailing can be done even in short supracondylar, intercondylar fractures if your technique is perfect. Supracondylar fracture with intercondylar element, I put 2 CC screws on the posterior aspect. This is a bit inferior, but usually I go a little superior because the fracture is a bit inferior. I have gone a bit inferior, but usually I put 1 screw here and 1 screw there. But here I have little changed. But you can see 2 cat eyes there. That indicates your perfect positioning of the guide wires and the screws. You can see by modifying 1 eye in 1 screw, but if you can see 2, it is the perfect positioning of the guide wires and execution of the CC screw fixation. Next, entry point is slightly anterior to the angle here, and insertion of the nail. In any view, you can see 2 cat eyes in this and beautiful reduction. Intercondylar, supracondylar fractures, I manage like this, and another case, almost similar, and a little posterior entry. Usually this is the position of my screws, not that one, but this is a bit longer segment below, and so I have taken the correct position posteriorly. I have seen the anterior position of the screws, but usually I prefer the posterior because it is rhomboid and fixed. And another like this, and good reduction and fixation. Don't do mistakes like this. This is what I want to show. The reverse position of the nail, and you get a recurvatum deformity, and the longer plate extending beyond this, and perfect execution has been shown by Dr. Tanga, but these are mistakes. And another case of non-union with only 1 screw below and 1 screw above, and that has been removed. But there is an anterior translation which has been tackled by reverse position of the nail, and the anterior translation has been corrected and good union has been achieved. Thank you. So you can just modify the position of this, and then you can get good reduction of the fragments by just changing the position of the rotation of the nail.
If I tell my patient to come at 6 weeks or 8 weeks for dynamization, he will never come in time. So almost all the cases have the similar problem. So I always do dynamic locking from day one, and I have never repented so far. Okay, coming to my talk, I should thank the Dr. Prasad for giving a wonderful preamble for this. Is distal femoral nail going away? Twin brothers, Amol and Amit, both of them had a distal femoral fractures. Amit, I treated this way back in 2008 with a locking plate, and this is at around 4.5 months. He had about 70 to 80 degrees of knee flexion. See the scar and the union. And Amo, this is the knee wound. Amol, I treated that the Hoffa fracture looked little easier, so I used a nail and a smaller incision, but this fellow was more comfortable. Supracondylar nail is a well accepted modality of treatment. There is no problem for knee, or no, you should not be worried to put a nail through the knee joint. There is no altered biomechanics of the patellofemoral joint. No knee problem. It's well recorded. If antegrade nailing is difficult, especially hefty patients, bilateral fractures, patient having abdominal injury or pelvic injury, in those cases, supracondylar nailing can be done even for fractures of the femur. Sunil Kulkarni has presented a wonderful article for distal femoral fractures. He never likes to go through the knee joint. He does only antegrade femoral nailing, and he has shown n number of very bad cases like this, triple segmental fractures. He has done a beautiful reduction, and the end.
Senior most orthosurgeon, Dr. Vijendra Garu, to present mementos to the chairpersons.
This is a typical syndesmotic injury, which we all have been treating by fracture, the fixing of the fibula and putting the screw. This is how we treat. I feel you cannot treat a syndesmotic injury without the CT scan. Because as you can see, this is the fracture, and the CT scan shows this is the type of a syndesmotic injury. This is the posterior malleolus, and this is where the situation is. So the posterior malleolus, in order to see, you must have a CT scan. Today I feel I don't treat a proximal tibia and the ankle joint trimalleolar fracture without the CT scan, because then only you can find out what is happening. Now here it is. Syndesmotic injury is depending upon these four ligaments. First and the foremost, this is the interosseous membrane. This controls the syndesmotic joint. 22% is the contribution. The second thing is this posterior inferior tibiofibular ligament. This is the one which controls the joint at 33%. And then this is the anterior inferior tibiofibular ligament. So these are the three ligaments which control the syndesmotic joint. So when they are broken, the syndesmotic displacement occurs. Now the relationships of the interosseous membrane and the deltoid ligament of the syndesmotic instability, if the deltoid is intact and the interosseous membrane is cut, there is no displacement of the fibula. But if the syndesmotic displacement occurs, if the interosseous membrane is cut and the deltoid is cut, then there will be a displacement which will occur. Now, all these three ligaments which are there, which is controlling the syndesmotic joint, it has a bony attachment. It can have a bony attachment. Here you can see the posterior interosseous, posterior malleolus is not a bony fracture. It is a rupture of the posterior tibiofibular ligament. And so when we do the surgery of the posterior malleolus, it is the surgery to re-establish this ligament. Every ligament has a potential bony injury. Like in a medial malleolus, there is a medial deltoid ligament is attached. Interosseous membrane, there is a fracture of the fibula. Anterior tibiofibular ligament, there is a Tellox fracture or a Shaput fracture, which is known as. And a posterior tibiofibular ligament is the posterior malleolus. These are the 4 fractures which occur there. Now, this is the fracture of the fibula, about the 4 millimeter there. This is the Tellox fracture, which occurs in the anterior one. And we have already seen the posterior malleolus, which is there, and this is the medial malleolus. Now, if we fix all these fractures, then the ligaments responsible for the syndesmotic instability are made intact. Now, it needs no extra syndesmotic screw. Syndesmotic screw is not required if you have fixed up all these ligaments which are injured. So that is the reason why this is very important. Now, here is the fracture which has occurred, trimalleolar fracture, the posterior malleolus is also there, fibula is also there. And in these situations, when you do the CT scan, you realize what has happened. And in this situation, you can fix up all these ligaments. Please see, the posterior malleolus is only fixed from posterior to anterior. It is never fixed anterior to posterior. And this posterior malleolus, anatomical reduction of the syndesmosis has been found to be the only significant positive predictor of a functional outcome. So, now when do you need a syndesmotic screw? If you have all the bones which are fractured, you treat them, you don't need syndesmotic screw. So when do you need the syndesmotic screw? What is the purpose of the syndesmotic screw? Once we understand the whole mechanic, then only we can treat the syndesmotic joint properly. When there's some ligaments insufficiency is there with the fracture, but the other ligaments, out of those 4, other ligaments break without the fracture. Like here you can see, if there is a medial malleolus fracture, if there is a posterior malleolus fibula fracture, but there is no posterior malleolus fracture, there is a posterior tibiofibular ligament is ruptured, and also the anterior tibiofibular ligament is concerned. There is no bony injury. We cannot stitch the ligaments, and that's the reason why those ligaments remain there. So in order to heal those ligaments, like a medial malleolus fibula, and there is no Tellox, so there is no posterior malleolus. So both posterior ligaments are torn in substance, while the fractured fibula and medial malleolus taking the ligaments. So you fixed up the fibula, you fixed up the interosseous membrane. You fixed up the medial malleolus, you fixed up the medial deltoid ligament. But other 2 ligaments are only the ligament rupture. You cannot stitch them up because it doesn't work. So now how do? We keep those ligaments in a normal anatomical position and they allow them to heal. And in order to keep that normal anatomical position, we fix up the fibula to the tibia so that the fibula remains stationary on the tibia and those ligaments will remain normal. And that is the purpose of the syndesmotic joint. Now here it is, stitching the ligament is not very fruitful, so we want them to heal in a normal anatomy. Indirectly keep the fibula forcibly in its normal position so that the ligaments will heal fully and re-achieve the stability which they had before. So now after fixing the medial malleolus and fibula, we want to know whether the other ligaments are sufficient or no, because we have in a CT scan you don't see the ligaments. So then we do the test. Then we do this test there, the hook test we call it, Cotton's test. We try to see whether the fibula is moving or it's not moving. If it is moving, then we put these 2 syndesmotic screw biting the 3 cortices. Now, but that Cotton's test is a subjective test. Somebody will say it is moving, somebody will say it is not moving. So that's the reason it is not a very conclusive test. And that's the reason why stress internal or external rotation radiographs are more reliable indicator of a mortise instability than the traditional lateral fibular stress, as that Cotton test is only subjective. Now, we fix up this syndesmotic joint with conventional textbook instruction, 2 screws, 3 cortices, 3 centimeters above the ankle joint. This is what is the book picture which we tell in a dorsiflexion. This is how we talk about. 4.5 millimeter, 2 screws, 2 to 3 centimeters above the ankle, tricortical with full dorsiflexion. And here, this is what we believe till now and practice. Now we come out of our comfort zone This is all which we did was wrong. Please understand this. Controversy is 4.5 or 3.5 screws doesn't make a difference. 2 screws or 1 screw doesn't make a difference. Screw is in dorsiflexion or plantarflexion doesn't make a difference. As a matter of fact, Tornetta says, screws in dorsiflexion is contraindicated because when you put the thing into dorsiflexions, it is not going to be maintaining the ankle mortise. Leg screw or non-leg screw also doesn't make a difference because now if we understand that screw what it is doing is keeping the fibula to the tibia and maintaining that alignment so that the ligaments heal up. And that screw should be positioned 2 to 3 centimeters proximal to the tibia, directed parallel to the joint surface and angled 30 degrees anteriorly so that it is perpendicular to the tibiofibular joint because the fibula is posterior. So this is what you're going to put in the screw. Tricortical fixation is used. The screw usually loosens rather than the breaks and may not disrupt the normal ankle mechanics. So you may put a tricortical. What is conventionally done? After a bony fixation, cotton test and if it is not stable, screw is put between the fibula and the tibia and it is presumed the joint is reduced. It is presumed that the joint is reduced. We do not reduce the joint and fix it up. Post-CT scan is very depressing. 35 to 50% of the post-op syndesmotic injuries which has been fixed, it shows this malreduction. 35 to 50%. So all what we are treating them up till now is all rubbish. We are not treating them properly. So after the open reduction and internal fixation of the posterior malleolus syndesmotic injury, the mortise appears reduced, but the fibula is posteriorly displaced, as you can see it over here. As you can see it over here. And this, you must avoid it. So how do we improve this 35 to 50% unreduced syndesmotic joint, which remains painful, and there is no treatment for that ever in the future. If instability, how do you execute to fix syndesmosis? Now this is what we never do it. This is what I recommended. The fibula is displaced posteriorly. So first and the foremost, if you want to fix up the syndesmosis, displace the fibula anteriorly. Then it will come into the normal alignment. Hold that anteriorly and transfix it with the K-wire, keeping that reduced anteriorly. Once you have reduced anteriorly, now there is a good chance that you have reduced the anatomical reduction. And now having come there, put the screw. This is the symbolic, we never go through the joint, it is always 3 to 4 centimeters proximally. So now what we have done is, we have reduced the joint. We have reduced the fibula to the tibia properly, and then in the anatomical position, we have fixed it up. So reduction is done, not that the main displacement of the fibula is posterior and not lateral. Reduction is achieved with the internal rotation of the ankle and manual translation of the fibula anteriorly. This reduced syndesmotic joint is provisionally transfixed fibula to the tibia with horizontal K-wire, maintaining the reduction. Now you can put in the screw to neutralize it. Otherwise, it's going to go back. Reduction is most important, which is in the shift of the posterior displacement of the fibula. You can also do it with this clamp. You can use the clamp, reduce the things, and then you can do the whole thing. Now here it is, you can see with the clamp, you are reducing the fibula properly, and then this ligament is restored, and these ligaments which are torn are reproduced into the normal position there where it can heal up. Now, if in case the posterior malleolus is not fixed, then you will never be able to get the tibia fibula back into the tibia. And that's the reason the posterior malleolus almost always you need to fix it up. Compression to the malreduced fibula will not correct the syndesmotic widening. So whether the syndesmotic joint is fixed in an anatomical position or no, how do you confirm it? It is presumed when you take it anteriorly that it is fixed. And that's the reason why if it is not been fixed properly, then these ligaments will not heal up and the joint will be shattered for life. So now is the checklist. After fixing the syndesmotic joint, see whether the joint is anatomical position. CMU is not very confirmative. It may be indicative. Intraoperative CT is ideal, which in our country we can't do it. So which is difficult in most setup. Intraoperative lateral view is very helpful, the position of the fibula to the talus compared to the opposite side, but it is also subjective. And hence, after reducing the fibula, putting this temporary K-wire, open up the syndesmotic joint and see the syndesmotic joint. That is the best treatment. Open, reduce, there is a Mercedes-Benz signs which is there. You see this Mercedes-Benz signs. This is what it is. This is what is the tibia. This is what is the talus. And this is what is the fibula. Now you know it is reduced properly. Once it is reduced properly, now you can fix up the K-wire. Then you can reduce you can put the screws. When do we remove these syndesmotic screws? Conventionally, we talk about it. We remove in 6 weeks' time and let the patient walk about. Does ligament heal up in 6 weeks' time? It never heals up. Bone heals up, but ligament doesn't heal up. So you cannot remove the screws in 6 weeks. It will again redisplace and you will have a malposition. 6 weeks non-weight bearing, this is what we do it. Now, healing of the ligament, which takes 12 weeks to 16 weeks, so early removal is harmful. So syndesmotic screw is stabilizing the joint and expects ligament to heal for permanent stability. So removing the screw at 6 to 8 weeks is not logical, as the ligaments take longer to heal and gain length. Must leave it for 12 weeks. If it breaks, or so rethinking on that. So now what? Alternate fixation came into the picture. Some people started doing only the K-wire, or some people started doing the loop. But today what is now become is a tightrope fixation. This is a tightrope which has become the in thing today. You put in the tightrope, so which can be fixed up, it will fix up the syndesmotic joint. But tightrope experience also has become now not very positive. There are significant rate of osteomyelitis with the disturbing warranting signs. Investigations have shown that. And that's the reason the tightrope is also being questioned now. So we have gone back to the screw. So we have come back to the old-fashioned screw, which is today most acceptable. Either two screws, 3 cortices, 2 screws, 4 cortices, but bring the screw slightly out of the 4 cortices to remove it if it breaks. In conclusion, if we fix fractures, plate fibula, interosseous membrane is restored. If we fix medial malleolus, deltoid is restored. If we fix posterior malleolus, posterior inferior tibiofibular ligament is restored. If we fix Chopart, then anterior tibiofibular ligament is restored. So all ligaments are restored. One does not need a syndesmotic screw. No avulsion in ligaments are only ruptured, and then we have to put those ligaments into the normal anatomy and fix up the fibula into the normal anatomy to the tibia. Otherwise, be aware of these malreductions. All these are the ones which are very common, and you will always end up into this malreduction. Never get trapped into this. These are the ones which is there, short screws, and then you will always get a redisplacement there. And that's the reason today the situation is never put the short screw and get the redisplacement. Because this fracture, once it occurs, malreduced, it will never be able to really come back to normal. If the fibula is short, you will still not be able to reduce the syndesmotic. As you can see, it has happened. So all what you can do now is lengthen the fibula with the graft there, and then the whole syndesmotic is corrected. So in the mortise view, you fix it up, see whether the fibula is perfectly all right or no, and then only you can accept the thing. The conclusion, syndesmotic injury has changed understanding. We must follow the newer understanding, otherwise we are going to ruin many of the ankles if we just treat it with the conventional style. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr.
2019 Dr. P.N.S. Prasad to honor the stalwarts Dr. D.D. Thanna with a shawl. I request the chairperson also to present a small token of appreciation to the stalwart Dr. Thanna.
Now you know the fibula length to the syndesmotic has been restored. Now whatever is the gap in the fibula, fill it up with the graft and put a plate. Same thing in the medial malleolus which is there, which you will have to fix it up and reduce the medial malleolus 100%. I always open up the joint and see that the medial malleolus arch is 100% reduced. Reduce the medial malleolus 100%. And the posterior malleolus, which is always there, which is displaced, you will have to again do the same thing, freshen it up, remove the fibrous tissue, and put the posterior malleolus back. And all these old cases, you will need a buttress plate to the posterior malleolus. Then only you will be able to fix it up. So the implants remain the same, but the whole surgical exercise changes dramatically.
And delegates, thank you for the invite to the organizing team. My name is Murali Krishna Sayana. I graduated from Osmania Medical College, and I seem to have the honor of being the only overseas faculty, but in fact, I'm very local to Telangana. Now, I work in a place called Drogheda. It's, if you look at Ireland on the west side of Europe, on the east coast, that's where I work. It's a district general hospital. I call my topic as peri-implant fractures and not peri-prosthetic because you see fractures which occur around short gamma nails, PFNAs, and plates. Unless somebody like Dr. B. Shivshankar removes all the nails and plates, you will have peri-implant fractures. Okay? The reason is the patients are living longer and they would have had some orthopedic procedure done before. And not too often you see an X-ray like this. And the whole treatment changes because of the implant that is already in the bone. And amazingly, all the patients now want to return to pre-injury functional status, irrespective of having a complex injury on already a pre-existing implant and decreased functional status. And you'll see X-rays like this as more and more patients have more and more arthroplasty done. Now, I will go through a 84-year-old patient who presents with a fracture going through the metaphysis of the distal femur. So that's a long stem femoral implant, and this is a cruciate retaining total knee. And she presents with almost undisplaced fracture. And if you zoom in, you can clearly see the fracture has occurred at a stress riser. This is a stress riser because this is where the cement ends, and this is where you have the metaphyseal bone. Now, if you look at the top end, this patient has been a stress riser for the surgeon. The amount of surgery she's had before, a revision shell with a plaid done on this. Now, why did this fracture occur at this situation, at this location? It's because the implant Young's modulus hasn't changed. It's the same. The bone cement, which is ending up there, hasn't changed its Young's modulus. But as the patients grow older and the bones become osteopenic and osteoporotic, the bone Young's modulus decreases at this place. And when subjected to bending moments, you will have a stress fracture. What do? Obviously, you do some templating. You can play with all your software and say, I'll do a plating like this. But intraoperatively, it may not be possible. You have to end up doing a plating with cables and also put a strut graft. I don't know if it projects well. There's a femoral strut graft there. Okay? And this is a 2-year follow-up. So what was done here was an anterior femoral strut. We used femoral head, used a bone mill, and got the femoral head croutons, used a DBX, and did a plating. All this callus is from the femoral head croutons. Okay, so what did we achieve here? We achieved fracture union. We achieved bone stock in an osteopenic patient, and she was able to get back to her earlier quality of life. This is another situation where you have a 70-year-old patient. And you can see the fracture is not distal to the tip, it's far into the isthmus. And this probably would have occurred even without a total hip. It's probably not secondary to a stress riser. So in the ED, they apply a Thomas splint. If you go back previously, when you see X-rays where you have AP view and the lateral view in the same film, it is very obvious the patient hasn't been properly managed in the triage in the emergency department. This should have been splinted properly. Obviously, when an X-ray is done like this, patients will be in severe pain. What was done? A open approach, lag screws, cables, again bone graft, and this patient went on to heal well. Okay. Now, this is a 85-year-old lady again who had undergone multiple surgeries and presents with a
Appreciation to Dr. Murali Sayana.